Hello, everyone. As we wait, everyone, I think there's still folks joining us. So maybe if we can just take a few moments to center and ground ourselves for today's session on taking a deeper dive into grant writing, which I'm very excited about. So maybe we can take a few moments. Let's breathe in, Hanumai, Nuaku, Hanumai, Hanuaku, Hanumai, Nuaku. E homai ka ike mai luna mai e. O nā mea una no ea o nā mele. E ho mai, e ho mai, e ho mai e. Ho mai ka ike mai luna mai e. O nā mea una no ea o nā mele. E ho mai, e ho mai, e ho mai e. Ho mai ka ike mai luna mai e. O nā mea una no ea o nā mele. E ho mai, e ho mai, e ho mai e. Yeah. Aloha nui, everyone. Mahalo for joining us today. Um, I was trying to figure out what oli to do as I was sitting here, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do a homai because grant writing stresses me out. So I don't know if it stresses all of you out, but just opening ourselves up to the conversation that is today, and I'm really excited about it because our presenter is such an amazing human, and makes all of this very scary process seem very attainable. So I'm pretty excited for us to get into today's ike. Before we do that, I need to share with you folks a little bit of our housekeeping stuff. So aloha mai kako. My name is Lili Noi Kohikawa. I am a program coordinator with Papula Kahi for substance use and mental health projects. I'm also the project manager for the Ohana Center of Excellence let me advance the slide. Woo-hoo. For Ohana Center of Excellence for Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander behavioral health. So today we're going to be diving into our session, which is a deeper dive into grant writing, an amazing workshop with Jeeyun Lee. So just a little bit of background on the Ohana Center of Excellence. We are funded by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Agency, also known as SAMHSA. The project itself is coordinated by the Hawaii State Department of Health in partnership with the California State University East Bay, Papua Kahi, and San Jose State University. Our Center of Excellence is a resource for empowerment, education, and support for individuals and families and communities seeking behavioral health care, including mental health and substance use resources, as well as for providers that are seeking information on culturally anchored or culturally focused care. Whether you're a community member, someone in the field of behavioral health that serve our AANH and PI communities, you can find something on our website or by reaching out to us. Our resources are really rooted in culture, language, and Indigenous knowledge, and we understand that Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities are vast and diverse. So our resources aim to reflect that beautiful diversity and that beautiful cultural strength that really keeps each one of our cultures strong and healthy. So if you're interested in touching base with the Ohana Center of Excellence, we provide culturally tailored training and technical assistance for those working in the field of substance use in behavioral health overall. and who serve the needs of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities. We also have an ever-growing resource library that's available on our website. And you can go explore resources by location, topic, and we even have a lot of downloadable tools as well. We have a network of regional steering committees that represent our amazing cultures that we provide services to, who all help to guide our work by helping us to understand the diverse needs of all of our communities throughout the country and the Pacific. We continue to grow this network, so if anyone is interested, please reach out to us. If you're interested, also please join our listserv so you can keep updated on all of our offerings, our cultural trainings. You can also follow us on social media. And we also have podcasts now, so please do go and check us out. Our housekeeping for our Zoom. So today's session will be recorded. So if you want to share this workshop with any of your colleagues, the replay will be available on our website in a few days. We are using the webinar feature, so this will limit your ability to unmute yourself and to turn on your camera. However, if you do have a question or comment, we do encourage you to use the Q&A feature that's found at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And then we'll save some time to address those toward the end of today's session. Please remember also to be kind and courteous and respectful to everyone in today's session. We aim to create safe and supportive spaces for all to learn and share ideas. And so microaggressions will not be tolerated, and anyone displaying such may be asked to leave the session. And after the workshop is finished, you'll also receive a follow-up email with a link to a survey. We'll also supply that link in the chat. We're conducting the survey to help us better understand how we can meet your needs and what was most useful about the workshop. So if you can, please take a few minutes to complete that survey. Another survey, so Papua Lolokahi, as our project partner, has been designated as an approved provider of social work continuing education contact hours by the National Association of Social Workers, Hawaii chapter. We maintain responsibility for the program, but this training, we do maintain responsibility for for this program, but we do encourage you to check with your local chapters if those types of credits are accepted. This training is also approved by Hawaii Department of Health, Alcohol, Drug Abuse Division for CSAC, CCS, CPS, CCJP, CS, and CSAPA credit. While both of those credentialing bodies are nationally recognized, we recommend, again, that folks check with their local credentialing body to make sure that all of those credits are accepted. So for those wishing to claim that continuing education credit, the link for the attendance verification will be dropped into the chat at the conclusion of today's session. And it'll also be sent through the email that is sent through Zoom in the day following, and just in case you missed it. So upon completion of that form, you'll receive an email certifying your attendance and credit hours, and this will serve as your credit letter for licensure. So please note that this email comes from a no reply at qualtrics-survey.com address and may be filtered to junk or spam. So please make sure you mark that address as safe or check your junk or spam folder. So if you have any questions, we'll put my email in the chat and you can email me. Okay, now that that's all about, I'd love to get to our speaker, our mea ono for today. Jeeyun Lee is of Korean descent and has been a guest in the lands of the Kanaka Maoli in the Kingdom of Hawaii since 2009. She has her master's in social work in international and community development and launched her career in nonprofit service over 20 years ago in the Midwest. After contributing to the Oahu nonprofit sector for almost a decade, Jee moved to Maui in 2018 because it was important to her to raise her son where he's ancestrally from, and for both to connect and contribute to that community. This was an experience she never had being raised in Michigan due to the Korean War's impact on Korea's economy at the time of her parents' immigration. They currently live closer to his Hawaiian ohana, who is from the Napali area in West Maui. She enjoys spending time with her son, Kaimokana, and husband, Jeffrey, immersed in nature, exploring Mauka to Makai. Jee currently serves as the Director of Impact at Maui United Way and volunteers with many nonprofits in her spare time. She is also a managing partner and consultant at ChangeWorks, focused on creating impactful change within our community. So mahalo nui, Jee. I will go ahead and turn things back over to you.
Mahalo, and thank you again, Illinois. It's so great to be able to join you all. And I'm going to go ahead and start share screening. 안녕하세요. 제 이름 지연입니다. Hello, aloha. My name is Jeeyun, and I'm so grateful to have this space and grateful for the encouragement from Ohana Center for Excellence in Illinois to ensure that this really important work of understanding and planning on writing grant proposals is accessible to our Indigenous communities in particular. It's something that's been, a passion of mine since I started grant writing, and I'm very grateful for the space to be able to share this and the encouragement to be able to create, this sort of support in this way. So please feel free again to ask any questions in the Q&A section instead of the chat. And I'm going to go ahead and share screen and we can get started. I do want to make sure and highlight that the other grants trainings that were provided via email to you all, I'm going to assume that you all have watched them. And I'll just do a quick kind of dive back into kind of the timeline and process of grant writing. But really today's focus, and I kind of themed the slide deck around, the lauhala weaving, because so much of what we do in grant writing is, to identify needs within our community, share them mo'olelo, and weave together, the needs of our community in these ways. And it really kind of resonates with me through this process. Gentle reminder about the timeline of how to prepare to write a grant proposal. And this was outlined in kind of the first training that I did for Ohana Center for Excellence. The first step is actually to identify that need within the community that you're serving and really understand and embody the mo'olelo of the project or that need. The second step is to search for what type of grant that you are going to look for, whether that be private foundation or governmental, what, capital asks, and we'll kind of go through some of this as we go through the worksheet. The third step is to plan, right? Plan who's going to be writing your grant, or who are the people that are going to be writing your grant, who's going to help you budget for that grant, who's going to administer that grant and operationalize it, who's going to report on it, right? So it's not just about writing that grant, it's really about ensuring that you've got the team prepared and ready to support the entire process from beginning to end, because getting the grant is just honestly the beginning of the process, right? The fourth step is to actually write that grant, embody that mo'olelo, share the story, submit it on time. And then the fifth and kind of last step is to execute the grant if you receive it, to report on it, and to continue to build pilina and rapport building with your grant funder to ensure that that relationship continues to build over time. So that process is important to highlight as we go into this, because it's not just about the grant writing part, right? Really, again, that's just the beginning. With that being said, I'm going to go to the next slide. What I'm going to do is kind of go through the worksheet and provide an example that a community member approved me to share so that we can kind of talk through some of these processes. So we'll review the mission and the need for strategic planning for your organization. We'll discuss how we can prepare to write our grant. We'll discuss researching your grantor and what their goals are, because that's really critical. Then we'll talk about planning to write your narrative, discussions around reporting metrics, planning for sustainability for your organization and the project that you're doing, if that is applicable. And then we'll have some time for questions. But again, feel free to use the Q&A as we go through, because I will be paying attention to that space. All right. So this kind of worksheet that I created helps you as an organization to kind of discuss and have answer the right questions prior to you starting. And really, the core of that is around what is your organization's mission? Whether that be you're a nonprofit or you are a business, what is the mission? What is the goal of you existing? And being able to fully articulate and understand that process, and embody that process as you start this process of preparing to write a grant proposal. So with that, not only is it important for you to fully, embody and understand your mission to a T, if you are a nonprofit or you have a board, ensuring that your board is aligned with what that mission is, and you all have clarity on that. A really important step in that, and a lot of times, in times past when I've helped other organizations, what I've done is had to take a few steps back to ensure that strategic planning was done for that nonprofit or for the organization. And the importance of that is if you don't understand what your goals are with your organization aligning with your mission, and in particular, if you haven't whittled down what those goals are, how you're going to achieve your mission in the next 3 to 5 years, the number of grants that you write and the ways in which you can write kind of are endless, right? And so it allows for you to really hone in the scope of the work that you're doing as an organization and ensure that all of the grants that you write are streamlined into your strategic plan, and it will support actionizing the plans that you have, which is really, really critical to make sure that you don't bite off more than you can chew, and also critical to ensure that the work that you're doing is really impactful, so that you're not just skimming the surface of different parts of your mission, but that you've really decided which ones you're going to really get deep into. And with that process, super important to consider, and this is where we talk about the breadth or the depth, right? So reach within your organization can be, I've hit 300 people and connected, 300 people to services. But it might just be like a single touch, right? Versus depth, which is I've hit 100 people and we've connected with them 10 times and we've seen behavior changes from that, right? And so what we're seeing from funders in this process is that they're less concerned. I mean, they're still concerned about numbers, especially within federal grants, but especially within foundation grants and other kind of smaller organizational grants, they're really looking for that depth. So they're not just looking for you to touch once, they're looking for you to create change, to be able to show the impacts of the work that you're having. So ensuring you've got a really solid balance between those two things is really important to consider. Overall, there's also a shift to trust-based philanthropy for a lot of our funders, where there's less of a focus on the grant reporting and all of those things that are, kind of a Western model approach, and more of a focus on let's talk story, let's have a discussion about what you're doing, let's hear about your barriers to services, or how you've needed to pivot your organizational needs to execute the project that you've had. And it's really an exciting direction that we're seeing a lot of these philanthropic organizations go in. I sure hope that it goes through that towards that direction for a lot of our governmental grants as well. But nonetheless, it becomes a partnership, right? And they literally call you a partner as you kind of get hanide into their work and their funding streams. And they're there to support you. And so it's really, really important to remember that they are truly there to be your ally and to be able to share out with, people who have funded their organization, whatever it is, the work that you are doing, and to advocate for that work that you're doing, and also to be there. I recently helped to support mental health grants. And as we talked to our grantees, we really made sure to share out, hey, you had this amazing plan. It was reviewed by the community and you were selected to receive this grant. But I mean, if we've learned anything, especially on MOE, if we've learned anything, it's that things are constantly changing, right? And so this plan that you had that sounded really, really in the moment, 6 months down the line might not make sense anymore. And we're okay with that, right? Just connect with us, engage in the process, and let's talk through how we might be able to shift the work that you're doing to ensure that the impact is the greatest. So a lot of these grantors are looking towards ensuring that impact and less on did you follow things to the T, and whether it makes sense or not in times, right? So that's why it's so important for you to have a clear understanding of your organizational mission and the strategic plan that you have as an organization. I would really just highly recommend going through that process. It's absolutely worth it. In terms of strategic planning, I wouldn't recommend going more than 3 to 5 years, because think of what's happened in the last 3 to 5 years. Even, just within our community, so much has changed, right? So a 10, 20-year strategic plan just sits on a table, right? But to be able to create a strategic plan with an action plan associated with it, I've used like a matrix model where it's clear whose kulyana is what for what portions and what objectives within your strategic plan. Makes it super clear what you're doing. And, having been an executive director in the past, it feels really good too, because then oftentimes when we're doing this type of HANA, it feels endless, and it feels like oh my gosh, what have I accomplished? I've been working and working and working, and I'm not sure, if I've moved that needle at all. But when I went back and looked at the strategic plan, I could see the progress that we'd made over the years. So it's really reaffirming. It reaffirms to you, it reaffirms to your board, it reaffirms to the community the work that you're doing. So in regards to all of this, I'm going to use the example of an organization that reached out recently who's, allowed for me to utilize them as kind of our example through this process. They are actually a for-profit organization, a small business located in Napili, so close to me on the west side. And they reached out because they're interested in, and they're just moving forward with it, typical local style, they're going to figure it out as they go, find funding to support creating a locally based documentary that documents the Maui wildfires, what happened from a community member that was inside the community, and through support from within. So, their mission or their goal within this, and this is kind of their background, right, is to create that documentary so that it is not other people outside of our community sharing, our community story. It is coming from ourselves, right? From within the community, with the relationships that this organization already has, which is super exciting, right? So they're not a nonprofit. I'm a firm believer that we don't necessarily need more nonprofits. We need the nonprofits that we have to have the capacity to do more within our community, right? And so what they chose to do was to connect with Monomo'oli and become fiscally sponsored by them to be able to have access to funding. So how that works is Monomo'oli will act as the fiscal sponsor. So it'll be their organizational mission and their strategic plan that's written out within the grant proposal. And then the work will be basically subcontracted out to this local individual and his team to execute the documentary. But it opens up the doors to additional funding streams, right? And possible grants and whatnot. So I'm curious if you all want to share some of the missions of your organization within the chat. I would love to hear, where you all are from and what you're working on and what your organization's mission is as we go on. And feel free to ask any questions along the way. So after you have clarity on what your mission is within your organization, and you really have, had the time to, process that, you want to kind of go into the initial planning. And that's where that strategic planning is that we're talking about. And that's why I asked that question of what are your top 3 goals within your organization in the next year? So again, whittling down and really ensuring that the work that you're doing is really, really focused. And that allows for the reporting to be easier, the data collection to be easier, because it's all focused around those same things. And it also allows for your your work to really be more impactful, because you're really focusing all of your grant writing efforts into, 2 or 3 specific goals, and you can leverage those grants to work and kind of work symbiotically with each other to make 2 + 2 = 5 through the process, right? So you can take one grant, and that grant might be funding for this organization. That grant might be funding the animations for the documentary, and that grant would be leveraged to support the marketing and outreach grant that they receive as well, right? So all of it is coming together for that same goal and that same end result, which allows for the work that you do to be much more like strategic and focused. So being able to identify with you and your board, what are the top 3 goals of your organization in the next year? And then, really thinking about, how does the project that you're envisioning writing the grant proposal on align with those top 3 goals? Because again, it's so many different directions and ways you can go. But if you can focus on those top 3 goals, if you're not working towards those top 3 goals, then you know what, I'm going to table this. I'm going to work on these top 3 goals, and then I'm going to take the stuff that I've tabled and look at it, maybe next year or the year afterwards, so that you're not spread too thin through the process of grant writing and executing your proposals overall. You also want to take a look and see, what type of ask are you looking to do, right? So is it a programmatic idea? Like, are you trying to operationalize a program or a project? Is it a capital ask? So the capital means, are you looking for funding to build a building, to do something brick and mortar? You really want to get a sense of that, because there's different buckets for even the same grantor for those things. Oftentimes capital asks are less frequent. You're not able to make those asks as often. But then the programmatic asks tend to be available more often, which is really helpful to know and to be prepared for as you do your grant research. So, this organization that I was talking about, it would be a programmatic ask or project ask around creating the documentary that goes through the process of documenting the wildfires, what the scenario was that led to the wildfires, how our community dealt with it, and the after effects of it, and how we move forward, right? So that's really a programmatic ask instead of a capital ask. The next thing to consider in initial planning is that context, right? So how does the above idea, right, this documentary idea, tie back to your goals and mission? And I'm using this example that's a little bit more complex on purpose, because the goal of this hui is not necessarily the mission of Monomo'oli aligns with, but is not directly within the same organization as this hui of filmmakers, right? So it's really Monomo'oli's mission and how that connects to this documentary, right? You're trying to provide context for how it connects to the goals and mission of Monomo'oli, because they're going to be the fiscal sponsor. If you are a 501c3 already, how it would work then is you would tie back to your personal mission and your strategic plan. Audience is kind of the next thing to go through. So who are you writing the grant to? The private foundation, the governmental entity. How you write your grant can be really, really different. So for instance, if you were writing a federal grant, the technical work that's being done and the very overwhelming, kind of frankly colonial style approach to federal grants and other governmental grants is, in my opinion, by design, very, very overwhelming, and it turns you off. It makes you feel like, oh, I don't know enough about this process to be able to move forward with it, right? But really, it's just, honestly, after 20 years of grant writing, still can feel that way at times. So it's really just about getting over that initial stress of it and knowing that all you have to, it's literally, you follow the form. Sometimes they ask the same questions over again. That's okay. follow the format, respond again with the same answers that you provided in the previous section. Those federal grants are done very specifically with a point system normally, where they review and they're looking for specific things, and they usually provide you a rubric of what you're going to be graded on. And it allows for you to then, you've got to be able to get the maximum amount of points in each of the sections. And that's why it's really important to know, what group you're working with. So within the governmental entities, you're really going to want to be very, very direct and answer every question. If they ask, how are you going to do X, Y, and Z? You are literally going to state, I'm going to do X this way, Y that way, and Z this way, right? You want it to be as clear and concise so they cannot mess up or not understand what you're talking about within a federal grant like that. On the flip side of that is a private foundation grant, which is a lot more flexible. I've even had the grantor reach out to me to be like, hey, we're really curious about this specific section. Could you elaborate more on that, right? So that partnership is much more solid in that space. I have worked with a few governmental entities that are working towards that direction, but it's definitely important to know your audience in that sense and to ensure that you are writing in a way that's compelling. So private foundation grants, having that context, sharing the story, sharing the mo'olelo, understanding how it connects to our community. That's something that Hawaii Community Foundation, Maui United Way, right? Organizations that are, within our community will appreciate and understand, to have. If you're looking at those federal grants or, larger grants like that, then you're really looking at crossing your T's and dotting your I's and ensuring that you're sharing that story, but sharing it in a way that's digestible for somebody who's going to be grading your grant. The next section is around kind of alignment. So when you're planning for this process, you want to look at your plan and the goals of your organization. You want to look at the project that you're looking at. And then you don't want to just write for any kind grant, right? What you want to do is you want to figure out and research the grantors to be like, who aligns best with my goals within my organization, and how can I support that organization's goals, right? Because the grantors have a goal too, right? I work for Maui United Way. We have a goal to, have impactful work within our community, and we have funders that we are responsible to report back to show that those goals were met, right? And so what I need in a proposal is to be able to have you show me how your goals align with my goals, not the other way around, right? So ensuring that part of alignment is happening and that your identified grant idea aligns with the funders that you're writing for, and how you even pitch your grant can look really different in that sense, right? So I was talking to my colleague and I was saying, okay, so you want to do a documentary film, right? So if you're going to write to a foundation that's focused on workforce development and impact within our West Maui community, then you want to focus on how doing this documentary is going to hire local community members. If they're a Kanaka-based organization, you want to share that you're going to, try, within the fullest extent of the law to hire local people within the community to bring workforce development initiatives and to elevate that process, right? If you're writing for an arts, grantor, then you're going to talk about the media side of things and the art of documentary filmmaking. So you can see how that lens can look really different, even though you're talking about the same thing. So what I would recommend is writing kind of a really thorough grant proposal that talks through and that you've thought through all the different angles that you can pitch your project, right? And after you research the grantors that are providing funding, you can start to align with that. So it's really important to do your research in that sense. I haven't checked the chat. Is there anything that I should follow up on? I'm just gonna check.
Lots of amazing missions.
Yes, I really look forward to reading this through a little bit more thoroughly. But I appreciate all the amazing work you all are doing. It's really an honor and a privilege to be working with you all, and supporting this process. Super, super exciting. You totally made my day, all of you. Okay, so the next steps after the initial planning and having talked through those things, right, is the preparation. So, so much of the process is around ensuring that you're properly prepared. Looking at the time frame, looking at the talent that you have on your team, and looking at the treasure or the kala that you need to make it happen, right? So, how long will it take you to execute this project? So, I was talking, with this filmmaker group, and it's like, oh, they think it's going to take about a year. So you're looking for a grant term that's about a year. Does it fit into the grants or the grants timelines that you identified above? So when you're looking at things, if, for instance, a federal grant is available in December of this year, and the grant awarding doesn't happen until June of next year, that's not the right grant for this project, right? So you really want to start to tease that stuff out and ensure that you're not setting yourself up for failure in, acquiring funds too late or getting funds too early. You want to make sure that the timelines align. Oftentimes, especially with private grantees, they're willing to be flexible, as long as you communicate with them. So being able to share that out, or even reaching out. I highly recommend reaching out to grantors and asking questions. You're able to develop that relationship. People will be like, oh, I know who you are. You emailed me about these things. It shows that you're preparing properly. It shows that you're putting thought into this process of writing a grant. You're not just throwing something together, at the last minute and pressing submit, right? You're taking the time, you're asking the questions. Honestly, sometimes even when I don't have questions, I send an email out, because it shows, again, that you're taking the time to go through things. You're asking questions about the request for proposals or whatever it is, and you're ensuring that things line up. But a question might be, hey, it looks like X, Y, and Z are happening. My stuff doesn't start until next year. Would that still fit into the grant cycle, or would that not make sense for, the project that I'd like to propose? Those are all really relevant questions, and no question you shouldn't feel shy about asking any of the questions. I feel like the grantors are really, really supportive of this process and know that it's a lot. Side note, some really exciting things are happening, within our Hawaii community, where they're looking to streamline this process for grants. And I'm really, really excited to be a part of it through a funders collaborative or a funders hui that would make it so that you would submit one grant and multiple funders would look at that grant and choose to support that grant or not support that grant, so that this process becomes more streamlined for us as community members, because everybody's really busy doing the work, right? And I can't write all of your grants, unfortunately, and there's not enough people to do that stuff. So working to streamline these processes and create healthier frameworks, for our community will help our community have access to the funding necessary for us to do the work that we already know we've got to do. The work that we're frankly already doing is what I see. So that's the part around the time. The talent is around identifying your team, right? The filmmakers, said they have an animation person ready to go. They said they have marketing and communications people ready to go. They said they want to do, some press around it, out onto the continent and other places. So, they're like, oh, we're going to need some flights and some rooms and whatnot. And I'm like, oh, maybe we can, work with an airline to see if they'll sponsor that portion of it, right? So really starting to think creatively about how you can make it all kind of dovetail in together. Because even if, like, let's say we were able to secure an airline to support this process, that's an in-kind donation. You can put that into other grants, right? Like when you're writing a grant for the animations component, it shows that there's investment within the community and within other funders that are supporting this process. So all of those things help to bolster up your grant and the work that you're doing. And that takes place by really taking the time to identify who are the people, right, that are going to support the process of getting the grant, actually executing the grant, reporting on the outcomes of the grant, the financials of the process of that, and ensuring that you have your entire team lined up in advance so that when you get that green light, you're ready to go. And then the treasure, right? This is probably, my background is in social work. I'm not a numbers girl, but think of it like you're planning a trip, right? So really the budget is looking to ensure that you have every single aspect of that trip planned and ready. So if we're creating this documentary, do we have the talent? Are we gonna pay people to participate in this because they're struggling financially? Are we gonna pay the filmmakers? I'm always really, really insistent that we work towards those living wages, right? We cannot undercut our own community, right? We have to show that value add within our communities. So don't be shy, pay yourself. Make sure that funders understand that there's an administrative fee, that it costs money to hire the financial team to support and execute this grant. That connection is critical, and that you as an organization are the right person to be able to execute that, and showing a really robust budget in terms of having thought of all of those different components really shows that you've thought all of those things through, and detailed all of that stuff out. So that's kind of preparations to ensure that you're ready to go. And then the next section is really around that mission of the grantor, right? So let's use Maui United Way as an example. Our mission is to, right now we have, 3 different pillars. We're working towards Ohana wellness and resiliency building, and we've got 50% of our funds budgeted within impact to support Ohana wellness and resiliency building. That is the bucket that our mental health grants came out of. Other things that really are the direct service work will come out of that 50% of that bucket. 35% of our funds, we are focusing on the capacity building, workforce development, these types of trainings, right? Like grant workshops, other things that will support and elevate our existing community and grassroots organizations and nonprofits, and our support network, right? Our safety net within our community. How do we elevate that process? And then we've got 15% set aside for like bridging housing, right? So that's how we're looking at organizing our quote unquote buckets. So if that's the case, how would a nonprofit or this filmmaking group, how would they align with that? It might be workforce development, right? They're hiring local people to be able to share the mo'olelo and the story of what happened within the wildfires. Or is it cathartic and like a mental health component, right? Do you have the angle of, we're going to provide a voice, right, for the community members in a therapeutic way to provide them the space to process and feel heard, right? Very different approaches. So it really depends on the grant and the mission of the grantor very specifically. So make sure that you do your research to look at what your grantee is looking for. I would encourage you to look at, we developed that Ohana mental health grant. And on Maui United Way's website, we still have the rubric that we utilized, as well as the request for information and the request for proposals. So how we organized it was, I didn't want everybody to have to write a full grant. So instead we said, fill out this quick Google form to explain, within, a short, brief, 20-minute time frame, what you're looking to do. Then our impact committee took a look at it, and they decided to then invite the best proposals within the request for information to fill out the full request for proposals, right? And then actually moving forward now, we're looking at possibly even doing interview styles, which is best practice at other United Ways as well throughout the continent. So being able to make it more accessible, being able to look at, what are they looking for? What are the metrics? How are they going to grade this, right? Think of it like a paper in college or whatnot. So making sure that you do that research. Who else have they funded, right? Taking a look at different organizations even on their websites, who's funded them, look at their social media, look at the social media of your funders, right? And your grantees, what types of things are they excited about? What types of things have they funded to be able to really ensure that that your proposal is going to align in the best ways possible through this process. So all of that is like the pre-con preparation work that's necessary to ensure that your grant is the most impactful it can be and the most enticing for the grantor. The next section to go through is around the narrative. And so that section's really like, okay, you've done all this great research to prepare to write this. My recommendation would be to take like an example grant, because oftentimes grants have very similar formats, and write like a full, robust proposal with all the bells and whistles that you possibly can think of, and use that as like your tool to cockroach things out of to write different grants from, right? You can rinse and repeat these things. Once you write them, you can take it and you can use it over and over again, or take pieces and chunks out of what you've written to prepare for the next other grants that you're going to write, right? You don't have to start from scratch every single time. So use your own already institutional knowledge or institutional grants that you've written, and use that to your advantage through this process, right? So within the narrative, you really want to look at what are the strengths of your organization. What are the current strengths? So, for this filmmaking group, they're local guys that are born and raised, on the West Side, and they want to share about, what happened to their community. Like that really resonates, right? That's super strong. We don't have to wait for CNN to tell our story. We don't have to wait for a documentary, filmmaker to come in from the continent to share that. And that sharing will be different, right? Because they're able to ask their neighbors and their ohana and their friends to share that, and they're going to share on a different, more intimate level than it would be somebody coming from the outside, right? So those are the different strengths that you can think about within the organization. Data, what data exists and is out there that shows that you as an organization are strong and capable of executing this grant? Like, what have you accomplished already? How can we take, thank you. What can we take for executing that grant? What exists already? What can we take from what you've already done that will, highlight your capacity to execute that grant efficiently and effectively and have the most impact within the community? You can also take a look at other data points around just general scholarly articles, 211 data from, United Way, taking a look at census data, needs assessments that have been done. Just Google it and take a look and see what you can find that aligns with the work that you're doing, because it's likely out there, to show different components so that you're not just kind of talking story without the backing of things. The work that you're doing actually is able to be backed up by other data, by other people, by other organizations that are doing work that's been successful. I'm just going to go to the question. You mentioned a streamlined process and also that we don't need more nonprofits. Is it possible that a streamlined process would eliminate some prospective grantees or nonprofits and continue to give more money to specific orgs that already get much of the funding? So I suppose that is possible. I personally believe in collaboration. So I think as much as possible, being able to align and have discussions with, I definitely don't think it should be a monopoly, right? Um, I'm actually working to build out some grassroots organization focused funding, because so much of the work that we do here in Hawaii is done just by community members, right? And why should they have to establish and work through a 501(c)(3) and have to work to maintain something like that when they don't need to, right? So it's really about what's out there. If there's somebody already doing that work, I would encourage you all to collaborate, with them, because I firmly believe in working from the mindset of we have enough, right? And if we work together, we'll have more and we'll elevate each other through that process. And that to me is like the beauty of Indigenous, communities working together. But I also will acknowledge that at times the organization within that realm frankly needs some competition because they're not doing the work well and they need to be able to be held accountable in some way, right? And so it really is, your assessment of how you want to go about working on things like that. And I think, trust your know in that process, because each situation is going to be really, really different, right? But it's very different in my eyes to be able to say, hey, we looked out there and there was nobody doing this kind of work. So that's why we're in this space. Or, hey, we looked out there and the organization that's doing this work is supportive of us stepping into that space, or doesn't have capacity to execute the needs of our community. And that's why we're stepping into this space also, right? Or we looked out there and frankly, they're not doing a great job. So, and we feel like we can do it better. And that's important too, right? But to be able to show that you've done your research, I think is really, really critical, so that the funders aren't like, wait, but there's like 6 other orgs doing this and they're doing it well. Why should I fund you? Right? Those are literally questions that have come up to me, between, in my experiences, where I have funders connecting with me going, can you explain why this is a thing? Because we already funded these 4 organizations. How come we should fund the 5th one too? And it might be like, sometimes I answered, because there's a huge need for it. And unfortunately, the organizations are at full capacity and unable to, which is totally reasonable. Or it's, I don't know, that's redundant. And perhaps we should ask, them to reach back into their community, right? So it's really knowing your community, knowing the other organizations within your community, and making sure that whatever you're doing, you're moving through with intention and not just doing it without assessing, the surrounding environment. Okay. So, and then like the last section within the narrative is really, figuring out what that identified need is. Why is the project you've selected and identified necessary for your community? And how do you know that this is a need? Did you do a needs assessment? Did you do a survey? Have you heard from other community members? Can you see, the data showing that there's an unmet need within the community? 211 data, recently, since May, I've asked case managers to have their clients call in to share what those unmet needs are. Because, in our situation here on Maui, we're, a year out from when the fires happened now, and we were in reactionary mode, sprinting, and now we're in let's move with intention mode, right? We want to have that data that shows that. And so, and that's what funders are looking for, right? In the beginning, funders were like, okay, here's the money, go and figure it out, right? Because we're just, driving the plane while we're flying it. Now it's like, let's move intentionally. We have a limited amount of funds. Let's make sure that the work that we're doing is really supporting the data that we see where the needs are. So really ensuring that we're able to share that within your grant proposal is really critical. Within this section, I also want to highlight a couple different tips and tricks, which is the use of Alela Hawaii. I think depending on your audience, how you use or explain Olelo Hawaii is super critical. So if it's a federal grant, diacritical markings oftentimes do not translate when you submit grant proposals. So I would highly suggest that you check in on that or not use diacritical markings. Also, if you're going to use a word like pilina or Olelo Hawaii or, kuliana, make sure that you describe it and explain it, because you're likely going to be sharing this information with somebody who might not, have the understanding of the language, right? So making sure that you are thoughtful and intentional about how you use that. So, for instance, I have discouraged people from like titles, right? Like the title of your grant proposal. Perhaps think about how you want to title something when it's going to be reviewed by somebody on the continent versus somebody here, right? Two very different demographics to look at. You can use, your grant as absolutely an educational tool, and I would 100% support that process, but you have to have it be accessible to the reader. So ensure that you think about that as and knowing your audience is really critical for that process. And then there is just overall like condensing, right? Oftentimes you'll have character limits within narratives and proposals. So making sure that your mo'olelo, you take that time, like I said, to, if it's a 40-page mo'olelo about your project and your program and the history of your organization, get it all out there. But then, it is really important to figure out how you're going to condense that material. And a lot of those questions that we've answered up to this point is how you're going to condense that, right? So you're going to condense that based on what is the mission of that grantor, what aspects of your mo'olelo align and connect with the mission of that grantor and the work that they're trying to do within their request for proposals. So you really want to ensure that you're pulling out those components of your mo'olelo that align with your proposal, that align with the grantor, that shows that you've been really thoughtful about connecting those things that aligns with the goals of the grantor, right? So you're not just sharing everything because you're not going to have time or space within the process. And then the last thing is, this is pretty new to me because I'm really old school and enjoy the process of writing, is the use of AI. I think that it is 100% okay to open up ChatGPT to put in bullet points, and I've done it. Like you type in there, make this sound more academic. Do you know what I mean? Like there's nothing wrong with that, and it gives you a like a foundation for that, and makes it so that you have like a draft to work off of. Obviously, take a look at it, make sure that it makes sense, because we all know sometimes AI messes up, but it allows for us to utilize this tool as a bridge to bring funding into our Indigenous communities, especially, many of us, myself included, English isn't my first language, right? And so it's 100% okay to put it in that way, and to figure out how we can have that be kind of our first line of organizing and structuring things. And it usually does a pretty good job, or, help find sources for these things, right? So that's a great tool that I think you can utilize, and that we can utilize to continue to support that narrative writing, so that it's less stressful and less time consuming and laborious for all of you within the nonprofit sector who are really doing the work, right? Okay. So reporting metrics. This is really important for you to have set up in advance prior to receiving the grant, and to clearly articulate within your proposal what you're going to report on. Again, similar to streamlining the 3 goals and the strategic planning of your organization and how your project aligns with that stuff, it's also important to align the work that you're doing with your reporting metrics. So what data is your organization already gathering about the population that you're serving, right? because those are likely the metrics you want to use, because then it's not extra work for you all, right? You're doing so much work already. This is an extra step. We don't want to create 16 different goals and metrics that you're going to report on for each of the 10 grants that you're pushing out, because then you're just going to be overwhelmed with trying to report and gather the data. Also, your clients or the people that you're serving are going to be irritated because you're asking 64 million questions for no reason, right? So ensuring that you can, keep it super simple, concise, and align the work with what you're already collecting or adding in, but really intentionally choosing what are you adding in, why are you adding it in, how does that help meet your mission, and share that story of the work that you're doing, right? So ensuring that you've got SMART goals, right? You want it to be really specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. You really want to make sure that you hit all of these things as you decide on what metrics you're going to have. So, for that documentary, your goals might be, hiring 4 local community members to support, the filmmaking process, within Maui, giving them, X number of hours or whatever it is, being able to complete the animations necessary to support the documentary series, being able to execute the marketing components and the release of the film, the editing of the film, providing possibly like a post survey after people watch the film on how they felt about it, or being able to provide a survey on the interviewees, right, who were a part of the documentary and how it made them feel to be a part of that process. All depending on, the focus of the narrative and the focus of the grantee. But things like that will really help to support the work that you're doing and ensure that you're not over asking for data unnecessarily. It's honestly something that we at Maui United Way have moved really intentionally towards. Like, we're not going to ask you just to ask. We're going to ask you because we're asking these questions so that we can create a dashboard that shows what our community's needs are and shows the impact that we've had, right? And we have discussions individually with each of our grantees so that they know why we're asking these questions. They know we're asking these questions because we want to create and bring in more funding to support and continue to support the work that you're doing, right? So that creates that buy-in too. But you should, usually grantees will allow for you to select your own metrics in many ways. So make sure that it's supportive of the organizational work that you're doing and the future goals that you have. Other times, with some of these, larger governmental grants, they have specific metrics that they're looking for. But again, try and figure out how all of that fits in and aligns with the work that you're doing.
Yeah, I have a quick question.
Yes.
That came in. I just wanted to clarify, just in case it's needed, because they're noticing that there may be some non-Hawaiian speakers. What do you mean when you talk about mo'olelo?
Oh, sorry. So by mo'olelo, you should answer this, Lilinoy, better than me. But
Probably a specific grant thing, though.
well, it's sharing your story, right? It's really the process of so I think about it this way. So I'm Korean. And so when I was growing up, my grandmother and my mom used to like share all these stories about how they grew up and the different experiences that they had, and being able to like you feel it in your heart and in your gut, right? Like the experience, because they're almost like they're sharing it in a way that has meaning behind it, and you feel the feelings as they're sharing that story, right? You want to invoke that desire to help and support this process through the words that you're using. So as I'll never forget, I went to Kaho'olawe to do some work, and one of the uncles I was there with was like sharing his story about Kaho'olawe and his experiences there. And it was almost like he was acting out his experience. Like he was physically moving and he was sharing and his voice was changing. And And he was able to like invoke that feeling, right? And so for me, that process is really connected to Indigenous communities, right? That ability to share, and in Hawaii we talk story and be able to connect in those ways. You want to invoke that feeling. So oftentimes, not oftentimes, every time that I work with prospective nonprofits who needed help, what I would say is, I'm not writing a grant for you unless I experience your program, right? Because I want to feel it. When I write, I want to feel what I want the grantor to feel when they read it. And so that mo'olelo is that process of like being able to embody and share it out. And it's something that you all, are already doing in so many ways. You share it verbally and orally, which is, much more common again in our communities. But it's taking that and translating that onto paper in a meaningful way. So I hope I explained that okay, Kanoi, or Lilinoe, feel free to add into that.
That's beautiful.
Okay. So we talked about reporting metrics, and then the last section of this worksheet is around sustainability, right? So once you've figured out all these components, how you're going to actually report, what you're going to report on, what's going to show the impacts of the work that you've done within your project, you really want to take a look at the continuation of your project. For this filmmaking component, obviously the film's made, pow, right? It's all done. But what he shared was that he then wants to do a follow-up film specifically focused on vai, or fresh water, right? Because that natural resource was really critical to why the fires happened. So the follow-up would be that process. Like, how are you working towards, like, how can the grant that you receive, if you receive it, around, sharing mana'o about the wildfires, leverage and elevate your next project, towards, having a documentary on vai, in particular to Maui, right? And the history of vai on Maui. So really taking a look at what are your operational plans for continuing the project after the grant. If it's something like a program, for instance, helping Keiki connect with Aina or natural resources. Is this a short-term project? Does this lead to additional funding? Will you be looking for other funding to support this process after it's gotten started? Exciting components of where funders are going now is they're not just looking for the new shiny thing, right? They're recognizing the fact that the work that we do as nonprofits and within the community and as grassroots organization requires funding consistently. So they're looking for, we're looking to have diversification of funding. We're going to do a fundraiser, or we're going to write for additional grants, or we're going to look for, a good kind of grouping of federal, state, and county grants, as well as private foundation grants and individual donor grants, right? So looking at that process, looking at the evaluations that are necessary, right? We're not just going to do one grant or do one project and be like, okay, all pow, like all done. That's what it is. You really want to take what you've learned and the lessons learned to continue to enhance, right? So looking at that evaluation method, how are you going to evaluate your project and its success or not, or it's not being successful, and how are you going to make those adjustments as you go along? How do you plan to fund the project after the grad's completed, if you're funded, right? Is it sustainable? Is it not meant to be sustainable? Is it project-based? All of those things are okay, right? Trying to think. So I helped to get I helped an organization here on Maui get funding for childcare right after the wildfires. It was a very, very time-sensitive ask for a specific thing. We set it up at Napili Noho, it was set up. We had our preschool providers who were able to pivot and support the childcare necessary for our community and our makua, our parents, to heal, right? And to access services and figure out where the heck they're going to get groceries from, and how get set up for disaster unemployment, all those things. Right? It doesn't need to be sustainable funding. That's completely okay too, right? But being able to explain what is your ask, and have you thought about this? Like, does it need to be sustainable, or is it a time limited thing that you're looking to get done, and then it will be done, and go back to business as usual, for instance. And then who will be in charge of the project? Really being able to share out. Sometimes I include resumes, or I include the breadth and depth of the knowledge of the team that's going to be executing this, to show their specific skill sets and how they are, the right group to take on this project and execute it effectively. I see another question. Is it acceptable to pursue a grant after or before having the proper staffing established, or should staffing be established prior to applying for a grant? So I think it's nice to strategize. So I recently helped to support a contract, and they didn't have the individual people signed on, to support, but they had identified people that were interested in supporting the program, right? And so again, it's really about showing I've thought this through, right? It's not just like I have this great idea and I have no idea how it's going to happen. Like, I've identified a few people that are interested in supporting this process. That's enough, right? Having certain staff, right? But I also had a accountant on staff. I had a operations person on staff, right? So the core is there, and the support is available. That's a really big issue, I think nationally, but particularly in Hawaii, around just staffing overall, right? We have, ever since COVID and even before that, the number of people that have the skill sets, the capacity, and the reliability to actually do the work is important. So to show that you've, done your research, and that, you feel confident in being able to fill the positions to be able to support the program. It also happens, and it's happened to me plenty of times, where you're like, yep, I'm good to go. And then you get you get the grant, and you're like, all right, let's go. And then you're like, oh, this person is no longer available because they took another job with, another organization. So now you're sitting here trying, I had a grant that was specific for the Kofa community, to support our Kofa community here on Maui. And I really felt like it was mission critical to ensure that it was a community member from, the Marshallese community, supporting and being that connector. So unfortunately, it took 6 months to find the right person, but I communicated with my grantor to ensure that they knew that this pause is happening. And this is actually a state grant. I said, I'm not going to just hire any kind person. I think that in order to engage with this community, it's mission critical that we hire the right person for the job, because there's a difference, right? I'm Malahini, and no matter how much I want to support this community, I am a guest in the host culture, and it is my job to support the local community. And, my son's dad's side of the family is from West Maui, and I'm 100% invested in holding space to support, the community until he grows up enough to hold that space on his own. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to make the decisions, for him or for this community. My job is to stand back and be there to support in the ways that I can. And so being able to explain that in a way allowed for there to be an extension for us to be able to extend the funds that we utilized a little bit longer, so that we could find the right person. And we were able to do great things by engaging with the Marshallese community in that way. So those are the main things. On the back of the worksheet is also that kind of same list of additional resources that I would highly recommend you all go through if you haven't already. There's a ton of resources out there, and it's such a shame because so many of the resources are not easy to find. So I try to bring as many of them together. There's grants, technical assistance support programs that Hawaii Alliance for Nonprofit Organizations, or HANO, has, where they have a team that is paid I used to be part of that team as a consultant prior to working with United Way, that will review your grant for you, your federal grants, because they recognize how important it is for our communities, especially our Indigenous communities, to have access and bring funding in from the outside, right? The funding we have here is already secured, but as much of them funds that we can bring in, right, that impact will be greater. So that technical assistance program is great. It's either low cost or free, depending on the different grants that Hano has. Taking a look at some of the handbooks and other things that grantors have put out. I put an example for the Office of Economic Development handbook. Taking a look and really, looking at programmatic budgets and getting a sense of what does an operations grant look like? What does a capital grant look like? What are the budgets look like for that stuff? Being mindful of the fringe or admin costs. So usually there's like a cap on a percentage of how much money you can put towards administrative costs. Sometimes organizations will allow for you to like list it out so that it's like, oh, I'm paying for my bookkeeper, and that's not part of the admin fees, right? So sometimes there's like little workarounds like that around it, but making sure that you know that stuff and that you know that your bases are covered, and that you're not going to go into the red administering a grant, right? It's really important to ensure that you are looking at all of those things in advance. Looking at a difference between goals, objectives, and outcomes. That info sheet's super helpful, because I even get confused sometimes because it's a lot of terms. And then looking at, the possibility of starting a nonprofit. What does that look like? Do I want to start a nonprofit? Do I want to remain a grassroots organization? Really ensuring that you have, intentionally, thought through, what your strategy is for the work that you're doing in your mission. And then a bunch of other really wonderful organizations that support grants and others, including, obviously the Ohana Center for Excellence, their workshops and their the database that you all have is really, really fabulous. So I would highly recommend taking a look at that stuff because it really is out there. Let's see. I'm seeing any suggestions. Looking for funding for positions. I know funders not like to hear this question. So I think it's oftentimes tying positions to a project. Even if it's an existing project, if you're able to connect the dots for funders, that's definitely doable. There are also some really progressive funders that are literally coming to look to fund positions and fund that capacity building. So I would recommend looking for what they call usually capacity building grants. And those are really specific to support positions as they move forward, and as your organization moves forward and grows. But oftentimes, this is why I talked about initially, like it's like the lahala mat, right? Like you're weaving together multiple grants to help to support, like for instance, when I was the director of development, nobody like pay my salary, right? Even though I'm the project manager for, county grants, I'm writing all the grants, I'm doing all the reports for the grants, I'm managing multiple millions of dollars, but my fee is not covered. So I have to or my salary isn't covered, right? So you're looking to put a little bit of that into the administrative costs, or I can be a project manager for a specific grant, putting together a freezer or an elevator or whatever it is. And so you can recoup some of that stuff, but you can also look for capacity building grants, or even going to funders and saying, hey, I have this great setup. What I need to be successful are these things, are these positions to be filled, a finance person to ensure that we're doing things properly, or, funding for an audit so that I can qualify for federal grants, or support from HR, right? So really pleading that case and making it clear that those positions are what are hindering you from doing your work, right? And from serving the needs of the community that you are most connected to. So that would be my suggestion for that. Where is the best place to find grants for people from Oceania? I don't. So I know Hawaii Community Foundation has some specific grants around that. And I would recommend reaching out to them to see if there's specific pots of money to support. I think, honestly, it is unfortunately, because it's one of our newer immigrant communities within Hawaii, that demographic is not as established for like grant writing and whatnot, but many of the Indigenous community grants are definitely interested in supporting that process. A lot of DHS grants, you can work through in that way to align with even ADAT, Alcohol and Drug Abuse Division grants. It really depends on the work that you want to do. But I think you don't necessarily even have to find grants that are specific to that community. It's really, that community is our community, right? And so it's really making sure that you can align with the work that needs to get done. And it's definitely a population that's underrepresented and marginalized. And being able to address that is, I think at the heart of a lot of the funders at large. So I wouldn't focus as much on finding grants specific for that community. I would focus on the needs of the community and aligning those needs with the existing grants that are available. Any recommendation on funding for paid positions? I think that I already answered that in the last question. But let me know if there's more specifics within the Q&A that you need answered that I didn't answer. Being of an Indigenous community and serving the Indigenous communities, we all know how challenging it is to get Indigenous staff and how challenging it is to serve the Indigenous community with staff that aren't of that Indigenous community. What is your recommendation with getting the local government entities to understand that and accept that, and to help us by being more supportive and collaborative with addressing this issue? Big question. To me, like, part of like even doing this presentation and connecting with you all is part of that, like, kind of resistance and to connect, Indigenous communities with the funding necessary for all of us to do the work that we need to for our communities, right? And so I think the more that we can collaborate together, there's a Korean saying that it translates into, like, Koreans are like grains of sand. They're very sparkly individually, but they don't come together very well, right? And so it's that idea of, like, by design, our, this system framework is designed to separate Indigenous communities in so many ways, right? So how do we work towards advocating together as a collective group, not just for Kanaka or Koreans or, Asian Americans or whatever it is, but how can we share that voice together? And that's something that, Lilinoy and I met through the Intercultural Leadership Institute, and it was really inspiring to me to hear what you all are doing, right? I can't wait to read through all of your missions and whatnot, but being able to really collaborate together and, fully or disrupt that system of siloing us and working together to have that common voice. Because many of, I connected, here in Hawaii, because what happened to this community and occupation is so similar to the story or the mo'olelo of the Korean, occupation, and so the stories there's a through line that's so significant that if we can work together to share that story together and bridge between us, I see that as really the way to have that embedded into the frameworks, right? We've got to work to advocate together and show that that it's really important, and to start to continue to advocate for and share that stuff out, right? In your grant reporting, to share with your legislators, right? Whether that be on a federal level, on a state level, on a county level, the importance of those things, because I agree completely, right? And I mean, it's resistance by me not hiring some random person to serve the Kofa community. I was not going to do it. So I stood my ground and I said, no, this doesn't make sense. I'm not a part of that community. the best way for me to support is to hire somebody from the community to serve their community, right? So we can all do it in our small ways, and hopefully come together to be able to do that as well. But definitely a big issue. I think we outnumber the framework people though. So I think if we work together, it's definitely doable. Are there grants available for community health work? Yes, there's a lot of grants available for community health work. Hawaii Community Foundation has a bunch. Community health navigators are really aligned. There's a lot of federal funding for that kind of work as well. I get really irritated because the pay is not what it should be for the work, because it's such a amazing way for us to be able to defer people from going into emergency rooms, or from and giving people capacity to age in place, right? All the different work that community health workers can do. So I think it's important to look for those grants. Trying to think who else was doing stuff within that space. Department of Health was, but I think, even just try Googling community health, work within communities, whether that be with kupuna or with youth or with families. It really depends on what it is that you're going to be working on. But I would, encourage you to look through the links that I provided within the worksheet. This presentation, yes, it will be available on the website. And an email, I think, will be provided, but Lilinoy, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make note of the time. We're almost at 7:00, so I wanted to just respect everyone's time and your time, because this has been incredibly informative. I learned so much, and it sounds like everybody else learned a lot too. So I'm mahalo nui for just sharing space with us, sharing Ike with us. This has been super informative, and it's beautiful the way you explain it, the way you connect to it, the way you hear the story within it and uplift that story. Like, it just makes it so much less scary, I think. So, mahalo for that. Really appreciate that. Yeah. We did have a few other questions that came in, but unfortunately we're going to be out of time. So maybe I can send them to you in an email, and maybe we'll be able to provide those to folks like on the follow-up email. We did have a couple just looking for additional links, but I think did you mention one about the Office of Economic Development?
Yes, but that one is actually within the worksheet on the back. Okay. There's a link to it right there.
Awesome. Okay, awesome. Yes. So please, we put the link in the chat to see the event page that has the worksheet and all the additional links that G had sent to us. If you have any follow-ups, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I can always ask G questions. She's very nice about that. And how about, just mahalo nui G, mahalo nui everybody for spending this evening with us. A reminder to please, in the chat, you'll see our link to the survey, which is the follow-up from this. That'll just ask you a few questions. If you can take some time out to answer those questions, we would really appreciate it. And then we'll also be including a link for continuing education credits. That will be a Qualtrics link that is in the chat. Just a lot of mahalos in the chat, and a lot of mahalo everyone for also sharing in your native language. This is so beautiful to see. It's so beautiful to see the culturally anchored care all across the space. It's just really exciting. I was nerding out on everyone's missions completely. So excited for you, G, when you get to look at those later.
I can't wait. Thank you all so much for the incredible work you all do. It is meaningful. It is hard, but it makes a huge difference, and it inspires me to continue to sit on a computer and do the work necessary to support. And I'm just, beyond grateful to be a part of the journey through the process. And don't forget, it's like fishing. Yeah, the more fishing poles you have, the more you hanapa'a. So expect to get denied. Ask the questions afterwards, like reach out to the funders and say, hey, how could we have proposed, this better, or what was missing, or, take a look at who was funded and what it was, right? Don't get discouraged. Again, these processes are by design defeating in so many ways, but please don't be. What I do is nothing special. I follow directions, and I connect with and share stories that are meaningful. And you all know your story better than I ever will. And so advocating for that and within your communities is just a beautiful thing to support. So grateful for all that you all do. And thank you for taking the time today to attend.